Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 17 of Spiritual Shadow Boxing. This is a place where we like to discuss the intersection of our spirituality, our shared humanity, and shadow work, if and when it comes up. So, today I'd love to welcome our amazing guests. Kelly, I know you'll intro, and Tony, one of my dearest friends, as well as Owen, our local reverend and also friend, and for some, a boxing companion. Um, yeah, just letting Kelly go ahead if you'd like. Just
Sure. I would like to say a few words about my dear friend Owen, who is also my boxing trainer. So we actually do the boxing, real physical boxing, jab, jab, cross together. He's a reverend of the Episcopalian Church across the street from where I live. He is a powerhouse in the community of Nyack, New York, than where we live in. He's the man around town, I like to tell him. He's always there with an open heart and a giving hand. So I like to introduce Owen Thompson, and I would love for you to maybe say a few words, Owen, as well.
Peace and blessings. Thank you all so much for the invitation to be with you again, conversation. And thank you all for this wonderful medium in which we can have these much needed conversations, particularly in this time of uncovering and time of revelation, time of possibility. I want to thank you for allowing me to vent and to share and also be fed by your work. And I just want to also thank you for the honor to be with Tony. And yeah, that's all I got to say pretty much. For now.
Yeah, and I'd love to just introduce Tony as I know him. I met Tony working on Marianne Williamson's campaign and immediately just felt like a moth to a light and just wanted to be around the wisdom and the truth and the love that you embody. And your work with empathy feels so important to me in a world where the emotional deficit is clear to me. Feels like noble, sacred work. And I really just want to give you space to share who you feel you'd like us to see today.
Oh, thank you, first. I received that verbal sunshine with all the beauty and intention that it was given. And I'm so grateful to be here with UKW and you, Owen, and for everybody who's listening, watching, going to take this in later. My name is Tony Scruggs, and I consider myself a spiritual being exploring life as an American of African ancestry. If pictures speak 1,000 words, I like to say 10 words that I think speak 1,000 pictures. I am a Montessori Methodist raised in Palo Alto, California. I'm an athlete turned actor turned trauma-informed empathy coach, specializing in nonviolence for communication. And my stops along the way include UCLA as a student athlete and fraternity guy, Major League Baseball with the Texas Rangers, where I played when President Bush used to run the team, India with Gandhi's grandson, Arun Gandhi, where I learned the philosophy of nonviolence and the tools of nonviolence for communication. And then the last few years, I've had the great honor of being trained in trauma and resiliency by one of the Silence Breakers, Louise Godbold, and an amazing neuromagician named Sarah Payton. And for anybody who's wondering why I don't have a Rangers backdrop in relation to the Dodgers, it's because my UCLA baseball brother, Dave Roberts, who's the first American of Asian and African ancestry to guide a team to the World Series championship. I wanted to honor what's going on with the Asian community by putting a backdrop of the Dodgers and congratulating my UCLA baseball brother on a miraculous accomplishment. Thank you for that time.
Thank you so much. Woo! Boom, boom. What a way to get started. So what I'd like to do is just to share with you some of the things that, as we were preparing for this podcast and, doing a little research on what is the difference between visionary activism, I'm going to have to say that word very slow, or reactionary activism, even slower. That, as I did a little research, I believe that reactionary activism has been born from anger and frustration about societal conditions. saying that, though, we do honor the many, many brave souls that have fought for injustice now and in the past. Reactionary is, I feel, energetically, emotionally, and spiritually, is a standing against. And when this type of activism is fueled by this anger and this frustration, it can lead to more anger and more division. What I see in visionary activism is creating large, permanent changes by looking at the vision you want to create. And to fuel this change with love, hope, and trust, and a belief that we have the power to change things by fueling positive energy into the collective. A visionary activist understands that their every thought, every feeling, every action generates a ripple effect throughout the field of consciousness, unlimited by time and space, focusing their energies towards a positive world, and then achieving the impossible goal. I love this, from inside out. I have to give credit to where I found that. There's a lovely woman called Sami Aron, who I kind of read and took some of the words that I felt really resonated with my own heart. She also says, the vision is a cause, a situation, social issue, or environmental injustice that catches your attention and tugs at your heartstrings. Activism is the art of taking action to bring forth what is bubbling up from your heart. Oh my God, amen, love that, love that. Bubbling up from your heart. So with that, I like to kind of bring it to the floor and kind of get your views on what you feel or how you define what reactionary activism and or visionary activism is. So I would like to maybe throw that question to Owen first, if you like.
I think you said it all.
Thank you. And, okay, okay, so I'll drop the mic. Done.
Well, I'm going to relegate my my parlance to my tradition, my Christian tradition, and so I see it as when we were first discussing it as Moses saying to Pharaoh, "Let my people go," as reactionary, the promised land being the visionary. Jesus feeding the hungry and clothing the naked is reactionary, visionary being the kingdom of God has come near, the kingdom of God is possible. And so that's the way I've always seen it, and I always try to walk in that Via Media, that middle way of responding to the ills and the isms that plague our society, being a presence, channeling that righteous anger in constructive ways, but also keep my eye on the prize and what's the long-term goal, what are we trying to achieve, and so forth. And so that's the approach I've had, and I found both equally effective. There's a time for everything under heaven, as is said. Time for a little bit of Malcolm and a little bit of Martin, if you will. And so I found allies and adversaries in both instances. But yeah, certainly, if it wasn't for the visionary, it'd just be a whole lot of noise. And more often than not, you find, as I found in dealing with some of the issues we've dealt with here in NIAC, in terms of police reform, and gun violence and systemic racism, is that more often than not, we have a lot of reactionary, but very few visionary folk. Folks will show up for the protest, fine and good, but when it comes time to planning and looking for the long term, you often sometimes feel, at least from my perspective, as if you're by yourself there looking for, where were you? You were just with me, but you don't want to stay in it for the long haul. So I hope that we will find a wonderful balance, and can have a sustained, because there's going to be always things that we need to respond to, that rapid reactionary force, if you will, to these issues. But also we have to know that the long-term goal is, for me at least, is to build the beloved community. And then for me, in my position as a priest in an institutional church, that more often, it's not really, at least Episcopal Church, we're kind of slow to activism in some cases. But I'm trying to get them to, yes, the kingdom is where we need to be, but let's also show up and represent. in these issues that arise and need our presence and our witness bearing.
Thank you. Beautifully said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony?
Just holding a moment of silence to breathe in what Owen just shared.
Mm.
Thank you, Brother Thompson. So the last few days, I've been thinking about this question, reactionary activism in relation to visionary activism. And it's kind of come at me in three different angles, how the circle that I connect with sees those terms, how I see those terms, and then looking for any examples in my personal life that I noticed those two terms come into life. So I'm just going to say the first part, what my circle of friends think about it, and then I'm going to pause, see what Farishta is thinking in the moment, and then I'll come back to how I see it. When I asked 4 friends about this question, reactionary activism in relation to visionary activism, the first friend said, well, you know, Tony, if you think about the former guy in the first couple of days employing a Muslim ban, the immediate response, the reactionary activism was folks went to the airport to take care of, there was lawyers doing their thing, there was folks expressing their displeasure and their lack of support, and they were all about reactionary activism. I'm like, yes. And I went to a second friend. I said, what do you think of this term reactionary activism? And they said, you know, Scruggsy, may not have thought about it this way, but when the former guy told the big lie and revved his supporters up and led them off to the Capitol, that insurrection may have been a form of reactionary activism. And that took my breath away. I was not ready for that. And at the same time, I study Aristotle, who reminds us the mark of an open mind is to entertain an idea without accepting it. So I opened my mind as wide as I could, and I tried to take that one in. Then I asked a friend about visionary activism. And they said, you know, young Anthony, this was a person that was more my dad's generation. They said, you know, young Anthony, when I think of Mahatma Gandhi dealing with the British, I think of visionary activism. When I think of Martin Luther King taking what he learned from Mahatma Gandhi and bringing passive resistance back to radical Caucasian extremism and toxic prejudice in America, I think of visionary activism. When I think of just the amazing ways that the people on this planet have taken Mahatma Gandhi's message of be the change that they wish to see in the world, I think of visionary activism. And then this person said, and by the way, if you happen to listen to the Sorry Not Sorry podcast with Jamila Rakib, hosted by Alyssa Milano and produced by Ben Jackson, they said, Jamila talks about hundreds of years ago when Roman citizens expressed their displeasure and their support for what was going on in the workforce in the Roman society. And so nonviolent direct action or visionary activism has been a part of the human cycle for hundreds of years. And then the last person to ask, and then I'll pause, is the person said, you know, Simba, when I think of visionary activism, I think of an American football player of African ancestry who decided with all of his athletic group privilege and all his financial group privilege to stand up for something that he believed in. And he decided to sit down during the playing of a song. And then when military people came around and said, hey, would you please take a knee to show your support for equality, justice? Colin Kaepernick did that. And so when I think of visionary activism, my friend said to me, when I think of visionary activism, I think of Colin Kaepernick. So that's just my friend's perspective, and I'll pause there to see what Farishta thinks.
I'm just breathing really deeply into this conversation. I'm realizing how much it matters to me. That's the place I'm breathing into, of like, I really care about this. This feels really potent and like everything my own life's prepared me for. So I'm just soaking you all in and feeling the energy of, I think, breathing through my own bias, right? As a pacifist, right? Yeah. When I brought this subject to Kelly, I had a very clear, like, visionary activism is better bias. As a pacifist, as someone who's studying nonviolence, as someone who's come from a war zone, like, there's been a very clear bias that I'm breathing through right now to realize, oh, they both have their place. This is the shadow work. They both bring their power, their light. And just noticing the energy that I feel when I hear standing against something feels really constrictive to my heart versus standing for something, which feels super expansive. What you said, Kelly, of love, faith, trust. And what you said, Owen, of that's the long game. You have to be in it, not for the one protest, but for the change of infrastructure, for the change of culture, of narrative, of mindset. So yeah, I'm feeling a lot of emotion around this and just grateful that we're doing this. Yeah.
And I would love to say something about the breath. And thank you so much for sharing about your personal experiences, and being very raw and very authentic about that. And, I can feel that coming from you. And, getting back to the breath, I feel like a breath in a way is reactionary because you're breathing it in, reacting to your surroundings. And that exhale is that visionary approach. So I think that, it's like everything. There's like, we're physical beings having a spiritual experiencing, a spiritual beings in a physical body. There's always that integration of and the breath is such a beautiful example because we all breathe, right? So in the breathing in, you feel the environment, you react to the breath and the surroundings, and then you exhale, and it's that visionary approach. And like Owen said, the long game, and to honor the people, like I said before, that has fought against injustice, because those people they were reacting to something that they saw, and they knew it was and it was not just, and it needed to be changed, and they had a courageous heart. So I think that maybe my next question might be is, maybe Owen, I'll ask to you in your own personal ministry, how do you feel that you kind of work with your community, our town of Nyack, Rockland County, and how would you feel like your personal ministry is in regards to this conversation, visionary versus reactionary activism?
Well, I want to speak to something Tony had said, and then I'll get to your, if I can, because I think Tony opened my eyes to something too that often gets forgotten in some of the dynamic, the dualism of the back and forth, is that, one person's vision of heaven is another person's vision of hell, vice versa or whatever. And there's something to be said about, you said where someone had the folks on the Capitol had that was reactionary.
Yeah.
And so how does one find the pathway forward, the pathway towards reconciliation, healing, common humanity, when each side thinks they're right and just and good and the other isn't? You know what I mean? That just creates a whole nother paradigm of which we need to explore. And I'm just glad you brought that up, because I know I Fresca, am struggling to be more pacifistic, because I think inherent in me is that, again, I would just have to say I'm a little Malcolm Martin, and I'm trying to become a little more Martin, Malcolm before Mecca, of course. But so I'm struggling to find the Brooklyn kid in me is like, but then I'm also recognizing the beloved child of God in me needs to be another way. And I think that's where the visionary has aided me in looking for the long haul. It is to create a better society, a more just and equitable and so forth. And so that, I think, tempers me in terms of the way I react. And I'm learning. It's a process of learning and growth. To Kelly's point or question is, for me, it's really about creating a sense of awareness within the community, because I think for more often than not in the institutionalized understanding of faith, particularly American Christianity, and I'll just speak to the Anglicanism of which I'm a part, is that we tend to focus on divine escapism, that something's going to happen in the next life. And that's never been my tradition as a liberation theologian. It's always been about what matters and what happens here, what we sow here, what we reap here, what we build here. This is heaven for me, as Tracy Chapman said, heaven's on earth in her song. And so that's always been the way I've approached things. So I'm trying to awaken folk to that in terms of being active in transforming the world and the community, our lives and so forth, hearts and minds in the here and now. Again, it's a challenge when people have been steeped in another way of understanding. The good news is, though, I do think, in lieu of what we've seen with George Floyd throughout the summer, in this time of where our attention has been forced to focus on what's been happening in our world. This, as I've said in other settings, this is an apocalyptic moment, and apocalyptic, as I expressed, being in the Greek, an uncovering, a time of uncovering. And so I do think that people are open, their eyes are being opened, minds and hearts, to the way things are and to the choices we can make to change the narrative. So often we look at it through a cinematic lens, many of us, and we are the viewer, the voyeur, but we have to realize, we're the actors in this drama, and we're writing the history and right now, the present and the future now. And so that's where I do find this time of a time of redemption and encouragement for the possibilities of getting people more and more engaged. No more can people turn a blind eye and deaf ear to systemic racism, to the sycophancy of the former guy's administration and all that it represented and all that still exists, as we saw so plainly on January 6th and throughout. So I'm just I'm just really in the rattling people awake kind of mode as a priest in my congregation, in the community, and moving beyond labels, moving beyond the denominational boundaries and things that we've erected that have become obstacles rather than avenues. So for me, it's really about let's move forward as the collective, and let's again, going back to what Tony said, and bringing people into an awareness of our common story, that we need each other, that we are the same. That's it. So that was long part. Sorry for that.
Incredible. Thank you. Yeah, again, I'm just holding my heart through this whole conversation and just naming that, like, wow, this is really important. And Tony, I'd like to ask you, knowing that you are an empathy coach, that you are looking through a trauma-informed lens, that you've gone through the nonviolence training with the Gandhi family, and I'm using this word loosely, but how do you minister this visionary activism in your world?
Thank you for that question first, and again, holding space for the wisdom of Reverend Thompson. Thank you for acknowledging my existence and the offerings that I can share with the world as well. How do I minister this? Well, I'm noticing this goes in line with, so I talked about my circle of friends and how they saw visionary activism in relation to reactionary activism. And so this goes to how I see it, which actually connects back to what Kelly said at the beginning, which gave me goosebumps when you said it, Kelly. I saw this yesterday as I was waking up. All of a sudden, this formula popped in my mind, like an equation. And I'm like, dude, what? You're way out of school. What are you doing creating formulas and equations when nobody's asking you to? And all of a sudden, I saw AO, abundant objectivity, plus CR, compassionate resistance, equals VA, visionary activism. And I was like, what is going on, Tony? What do you do? It was like a couple of people were having a conversation in my head. And I remembered the Wayne Dyer teaching that abundance or spiritual wealth is being against nothing. And objectivity is judging nothing or no thing. So then I thought about, okay, abundant objectivity plus compassionate resistance. And for me, compassionate resistance is empathy with proactivity. After 2 weeks with the Gandhi family, I finally experienced comfort and said, do you mind if I shift the term passive resistance to compassionate resistance? Because my fraternity brothers and baseball teammates, they're not going to connect with that term. And they were like, do what you will, young Anthony. And I was like, oh my goodness. So abundant objectivity plus compassionate resistance equals visionary activism, the way I saw it. So my friends were looking at it pragmatically. I was kind of seeing it philosophically. And then I remembered that Wayne Dyer talked about, so always be about what you're for. And Kelly, I really agree with you. For me, Visionary activism is abundance. Reactionary activism is coming out of an energy of scarcity, not bad faith, but it's coming from an energy of scarcity. So I am for an enlightened, educated youth. I am for peace and cooperation. I am for a more wonderful way of living. And I am for respect for each other's feelings, needs, and beliefs. So I think the answer to the question, Farishta, is I minister visionary activism by being the change that I wish to see in the world, and by utilizing the second point of the Gandhi philosophy, my life is my message, because visionary activism knows that human beings have a deep need for autonomy. So the idea of being controlled is something that is a disconnector. So visionary activism says gun safety. Visionary activism knows that human beings have a need to prevent themselves from being restrained, which you could take that conversation centuries back and really like take a look at it. But in this moment, I just want to say it again. Human beings have a need to prevent themselves from being restrained. Mm-hmm. Next time you see some footage on TV, I want you all to remember that. Human beings have that need. So where reactionary activism might talk about restrictions and washing your hands and wearing a mask and physical distancing, visionary activism talks about safety measures that will contribute to the well-being of your fellow members of Team Humanity, like face coverings, like hand hygiene, like physical distancing. And then last point on this, visionary activism realizes that survivors may get a little bit activated by terms like triggered. So visionary activism says activated rather than triggered. Oh, and then just the last little piece, just to throw out there, is I'm pretty sure visionary activism is about reimagining policing, protecting policing, freeing police from resources to do this, and just seeing policing in a whole different reimagined way. So thank you for that question, Farishta. I think my life is my message is the answer.
Thank you. If could you, Tony, do us a favor and at some point put that equation in the chats, because it was amazing. It was so beautiful, and because of it, I'm going to take the liberty right now to just share with you a little bit of my download that I received in a meditation before we went live, because I just feel like it really connects to what you said. And when I went into my meditation and kind of try to get my wisdom from above, first thing that came is, hey, what about spiritual activism? Right? So what I got is, because often when I write when I channel, it's often in poetry. And what I wrote is, spiritual activism is to lead with the heart, ablazed behind the armor of divinity, a sword of truth in your right hand, the sun in your left hand. To become the witness of a world unfolding, with no boundaries, no separation, and with unlimited potential for the human. And to seek spiritual activism is to face the battlefield of your own heart. Because for you to heal is how we serve. We serve ourselves, and then we serve the collective heart of the world. So I think that we can take it even further, because a lot of the things, Tony, that you just said really kind of resonated and made my heart sing. The fact that visionary activism too is kind of the undercurrent of a spiritual activism, or looking through the eyes of a spiritual activism. So maybe, Owen or Tony, how you can address how you feel about, being the change, as the Gandhi family says. The change within, because I think all of us here on this path, on this earth, are working on trying to, open up the shadows of our hearts, that shadow box thing, and how maybe the path of healing, what it looked for you, maybe, Tony, to bring you to this part of visionary activism and spiritual activism. That was a long-winded question, but you got the gist, so you just go with it. All right, I'm gonna quiet now. I'm gonna shut my mic off. Tony, would you mind kind of commenting on that, please?
I would actually love to give the floor over to Reverend Thompson, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you. I was kind of a little mesmerized by some of that, so I'll try to give it some direction. I will say that I think as the conversation has unfolded, and I am always consider myself a teacher. I mean, sorry, a student rather than I am a teacher. And I will say that, you know, I came in with my kind of prescribed understanding of these two terms, and I do think my eyes have been opened, all four of them, towards a greater understanding. And I particularly when Tony said about the abundance and scarcity, and the way I look at that is, you know, one of the things I have to remind myself is that I'm part of something larger than myself. You know, one can feel a great sense of despair and anxiety in the moment, but when one thinks of oneself as part of a larger narrative, a larger story, something that has purpose and direction and meaning, you know, that has often aided me greatly when I have had those reactionary moments to the things that have occurred in my life or in the nation, the world. To know, for me as a person of faith, that there is, as I see it and understand it and believe and profess, a loving God at who's in part of this, that we're not left to our own devices. That helps me step into that God's vision for us, beyond the reaction of the tit for tat, us versus them, of which we've grown accustomed. And so I do like that notion of it being out of reactionary versus the abundance. I think that just was like a, you know, they need a reaction on the Zoom for when your mind is blown by something that has been shared. And so I also, you know, in terms of my work, I'm trying to change the lexicon, the parlance within the church within my congregation, and the setting is that we often refer to the church as something other than ourselves, outside of ourselves, detached from ourselves, versus we being the church. And by that, I mean, for me, and for those of us who profess this faith tradition, that we are the body, the hands, the heart of Christ in the world, right? And that changes the mindset from just the reaction of showing up on a Sunday for whatever reasons that would bring one there, to it being a way of life and a way of commitment. And this is where I do look at Martin as someone who understood that, Brother Martin Luther King, because, you know, it was for him, it was who he was, and being shaped and molded by Gandhi, I think just only speaks to his ability to plug himself into the overall overarching work of God's vision for humanity, even in the midst of those moments where he, in the Birmingham jail, expressed despair and doubt, but yet was sustained and could still see that promise because he saw it from an abundance. And his focus was not just on the political aspects of the Montgomery bus boycott and all that, but it became about the greater story, helping to free people from the imprisonment of racism and the things that they were inculcated in. So it's just, yeah, I'm Tony, my man.
Yeah.
You hit me, man. You hit me. Thank you. Thank you.
Tony's the man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'm feeling called even just to bring this, you know, to you, Tony. What I'm hearing from you, Owen, which I resonate with, is the faith walk.
Yeah.
Right. I will say something that came from my reverend, which I held here, which was like the emanations of God must walk through this turmoil with their hearts wide open. Right. That's something I try to live by, because I feel like my heart's broken every day, and yet there's also hopefulness in that. And the piece I'm going to bring is being someone who stands in the vibration of the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Not the vibration of the problem, which I think of as reactionary. And still, I've got some questions about how that benefits that I will bring in. But Tony, my beloved friend, this idea of standing in the vibration of the answer, and as Reverend Owen said, that being a faith walk sometimes, right? The long game. How does that resonate with you?
There's an obscure, oh my goodness. Oh, let me first receive all of the beautiful energy that's in the space right now from Kelly, Owen, and Frista. So let me acknowledge that. Whew. There's this obscure nonviolence for communication hip hop line which is why it's obscure, because mixing kumbaya philosophy with hip hop isn't like the match that most people are looking for. And there's this obscure line that says, focus on what you want, you'll attract it like a magnet. Embrace your spirit like Othello or Hamlet. And so when you just talked about walking in the space of what you want to have happen, or for NVC, it's focus on what you don't want and instead of focusing on what you don't want, or using positive, doable, clear action language instead of focusing on what you don't want language, or abundance versus scarcity. It seems like we're exploring multiple dimensions of a similar vibe. Is it spirit, mind, and body? Is it Father, Son, and Holy Ghost? I mean, it seems like we are touching on, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about this. It seems like we are just touching on, we might be with Martin on at the steps right now. We might be in the oneness right in this moment that Deepak Chopra talked about, surrendering. It's not your house, it's the house that you live in. It's not your car, it's the car that you drive. I get this sense that time has ceased to exist in this moment, and we have transformed what we were thinking we were talking about with visionary activism into what Kelly was wanting to share around spiritual activism. So I don't know if any of that made sense, but I'm just bouncing with exuberance right now, Farishta.
Yeah, and I just want to hold, like, I feel like tears at the edge of my being, just and joyful ones, not just a fullness of like, this is the beloved community. This is what I've prayed for. So you are all in this moment an answered prayer for me, and that's what I'm holding right now as we navigate some actual interview questions. So
Oh yeah, we are interviewing. First, you said you had a few more questions. What do you have?
I do. Yeah, I'm curious because, again, I'm breathing into my bias of visionary activism being the best, and I'm learning here as this unfolds. I'm curious for both of you what you see the benefits of reactionary activism being, knowing, we can't unpack it all in 10 minutes, but how it has fueled change in our history and its place, its honored place within humanity. Rev, I will pass it over.
I think the benefits clearly is you're showing up and showing concern, the response to the action, whether that's, whatever side you want to look at that as being, but I think it does show, particularly for the aggressor, if you will, that those actions are met with concern and met with presence, not necessarily violence for violence sake. But for example, the advent of the Black Lives Matter movement in response to what we've been seeing, it was a reactionary moment initially, and now it's a vision. It's a movement beyond what I think it may have initially saw itself as at the outset. So for me, it's really about showing again that we are not asleep. That's showing that we are alert to, aware of, and engaged in the various things that are afflicting, particularly the needs of the suffering other. Because I think I would be upset, for example, or I would question where I lived if Nyack was not a place where I knew if something happened against someone in our community or a group, I would be concerned if we had folks who didn't come out to support, to stand vigil, to speak out and stand with, and stand up for. So I do think it has its place. But again, I think where you get into the vision part of it it almost seems like a natural progression to go from one thing as the stepping stone onto the larger thing. So I do see them working in tandem. But I also, again, as Tony helped me see, I also see the pros and the cons therein. But I do think you need to show up, and we need to have people who are advocating for, that display we saw at the airports right after the Muslim ban that Tony brought up earlier. You know, that gave me courage, and that gave me hope, because it was all despair. The fact that this country would choose the other guy, the former guy, and then all this stuff happening, particularly after, not, although it was far from utopia, the 8 years, or the 12 years rather, we had, well, 8 years, right? We had prior, you know, and then to go right to this. So for me, I was like, it was just so good to see that people care, people are stepping up, people are engaging, people are part of the process, people are going to be part of the solution. That's the good side of it.
And if there's no objections, I would love to just play off what the Rev just said. I think he answered. I don't want to double up on wisdom. So I'm going to actually just take it from where he left off and say, where reactionary activism creates that spark for what comes next. I noticed for me, in the middle of 2020, there was a collective experience that excavated a lot of unhealed intergenerational wounds, combined with a global collective experience with the pandemic. And in that moment, all of what I learned from my uncle, who's an anthropologist, came back to me. And I was thinking, okay, remember when your uncle said human variation is the scientific term that we misrefer to as race, because race is the entirety, not the variety. Remember what he said about human beings being the shades of the same one color brown, from the lightest variation to the highest one around. And remember what he said about the use of chromography, or describing people as colors, actually creates perpetual hierarchy. So take what your anthropologist uncle said, use the reactionary activism of the American collective event, the global collective event, and use the skills that you learned as an athlete, as an actor, and as a trauma-informed empathy coach, and do something with it, Tony. Be the change. Your life is your message. So I create this webinar called Transforming Racism into Connection and Kindness Empathically. And I'm trying to be the change I wish to see in the world. I'm getting goosebumps. I'm thinking about how I can be a part of the visionary activism energy. And then this lovely woman, this beautiful heart named Farishta, comes to a webinar as a participant. And what does she do? She takes her skills, her excellence as an artist, and she creates a version of visionary activism based on my visionary activism. So with that said, if there's spaciousness in the room, I would like to share with everybody the art that Farishta created that I experienced as my personal version of visionary activism. It was a song that she co-created, and please bring up the other person into the space, Farishta, the partner.
My co-writer was Miranda Lambert.
And Miranda and Farishta created this beautiful ally anthem, which was an empathic lullaby to me. And I added a few pictures to it. So I hope you enjoy the next couple of minutes. By the way, that's me at Jackie Robinson Stadium. Who knew Jackie Robinson was taking a knee way back then? Here you go. Thank you, Farishta.
I see a story on the news, I can turn it off. You see your mother or your son in the eyes of every loss. I hear a siren down the road, I can block it out. You hear it ringing and you fear for everyone you love. How come when you scream nobody hears? How come when you cry nobody cares? You say you had your soul crushed so many years. So lay your burden on my shoulders, I can share some of the pain. See you hurting, I can hold it. I'll carry half the weight. Oh, what a storm that you've been braving. Oh, what a heavy heart. So lay your burden on my shoulders, I into a store, I get treated kind. They're watching you just like a hawk, like your skin's some kind of crime. I feel a little bit on edge when driving past a car. You're fearing this could be the last moment that you've got. How come when you scream nobody hears? How come when you cry nobody cares? You say you had your soul crushed so many years. So lay your burden on my shoulders. I can share some of the pain. See you hurting, I can hold it. I'll carry half the weight. Oh, what a storm that you've been braving. Oh, what a heavy heart. So lay your burden on my shoulders. I can share some of the pain. You're living in a war zone that you can't escape. Fighting for your sacred worth. Angry, never feeling safe. We will ride these waves together until we force the tides to change. So lay your burden on my shoulders. I can share some of the pain. See you hurting, I can hold it. I'll carry half the weight. Oh, what a storm that you've been braving. Oh, what a heavy heart. So lay your burden on my shoulders. I can share some of the pain.
So when I think of visionary activism, I think of that gift by Farishta. And I'm so grateful that you're in my life. And that was the best empathic lullaby that I've ever received.
Tony, you are a beloved in my heart from the moment I met you, and your sharing of how soul crushing this journey has been in ways for you as a spiritual being living with your American African ancestry. I didn't know what I didn't know, and your vulnerability and your share birthed that song. I wanted you to have an anthem song. I want many to have an anthem song. Thank you for surprising us with a gift you gave me that I gifted you with, that you gifted back. Like it, that is to me the sacred activism we're about, that we keep giving and receiving with each other. This infinity energy feels so good to me. Thank you. Thank you all. I'm really touched.
And I want to thank and I want to acknowledge you for that most amazing song that you co-wrote. I didn't realize. I knew you were very talented, but I didn't know the extent.
And I want to honor Miranda because she's singing. So I just
Oh yeah.
If anyone wants to check out Miranda Glory, that's what she goes by. She was feeling the same energies for her friends, and so the co-write was Flow.
Yeah. So we'll write one. We'll have you a little task of writing one for Owen, for the Rev man, right? And I can't say enough about how much my heart is full from. I'm going to use an expression that Farishta always says. I'm going to copy her words, but my heart is so full right now. Like I have tears in my eyes because, like you, I was kind of prejudiced against the word reactionary. To me, as a person that feels like I try to live my life first as a spiritual being and then as a physical being. But, it's so difficult to walk that, and that faith walk that Owen mentioned and that you kind of brought up against. It is that faith walk. And it is that understanding that if you understand the observer effect of being the witness, we are the witness of our own walk. We are the witness of the world. And that spiritual activism is to face, again, the battlefield of your own heart and to clear that away so we can walk softly upon the earth together. So I just can't say enough. And we have a few more minutes before the podcast is over. If the Rev, that's gonna be my new nickname for you, the Rev. wants to say a few last words, and then maybe Tony as well, and then I guess,
Well, the only thing I can say is just thank you for pouring yourselves out that I may be made full, and for giving of yourselves that I could have, and for teaching me more than I came in knowing, certainly, and then also just for bringing the visual reminders of the goodness and love that and hope that exists for us in this world, and because all of us who are trying to do this work know that there are days you feel forlorn, you feel alone, and to be and experience this type of community, be it virtual or otherwise, and the energy shared and expressed, I can say I know Tony shrugs now. Tony, I want to ask, if I may, what fraternity are you a member of?
At the University of California, Los Angeles, I was a member of the Theta Xi fraternity, Alpha Zeta chapter, AZ 903.
Wow, blessings, cool. All right, Sigma man here, and from Raleigh, North Carolina, 92. Yes, indeed, community. But thank you all. I'm just blown away by everything, and thank you for Fresco. The song was just wow. Yeah. I need a copy of that.
You got it.
Thank you.
And thank you too, Tony. I'm wanting to let you be seen as well as we wrap this up. This has been, I feel like, just the surface of so much more, right? And I always hold like there is always more. So just curious if there's something you would like to be seen in as we wrap up, anything you'd like to share in this community with us?
Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Farishta. Thank you for everybody who's with us in this moment. Thank you, everybody who is listening or watching to this at your own comfort from the comfort of your own home. I was wanting to do a activist tool called the human microphone or the mic check. And then I realized I'd actually rather just say it myself and then have everybody, when they watch it back, say it to themselves when they do. So this is meant to be a call and response, but I'm just going to do the whole thing. What I'm thinking, and I'm so grateful to be here. Farishta, I really did not have any idea how that song would hit me with you present in the space. That really was jarringly overwhelming and beautiful at the same time. So here is the little poem or the prayer that I would like to say for Team Humanity. We, the insistence, with strength, kindness, bravery, and empathy, will do no harm, will take no shit, and will affect positive change, spiritually, emotionally, and physically, for our fellow Americans and for our fellow members of Team Humanity. You feel me? The end. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much. That is just a perfect way to encapsulate Team Humanity. Oh, and I see you unmiked, so I'm going to let you.
I gotta thank Kelly, for the extended invitation and for trusting me to be a part of this, and for sharing herself and for her friendship and support over these past few years. So she's been a light in the midst of the darkness for me in many ways. So I know I give her a hard time and I can be moody. But
No.
we spiritual people are like that,
No, and I want to thank you, Owen. This is, I think, the third spiritual shadowboxing podcast that you have been on, and we have such a big heart for you and a love for you. And I know you're a very busy man, and thank you for taking time out to be with us and to share who you are with us, because you are an amazing man of faith, a man of love, and this community is so much better because you're in it, in the world. So,
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Sure, Cass, my love.
Hi, Cass. Hi, everybody. Thank you. That sounded very selfish. I guess you're ending. I had to take a call. I'm sorry I missed the whole entire thing. The first thing I said was that I was the president of local chapter of FOR for like 5 years. And I'm still in touch with this wonderful organization. And I would love for you all to be part of these Thursday. Well, it's every Thursday at 4 p.m. I don't know if you're able to. I can supply you with the information. Ethan Vesley Flood heads it up, among other people just like you. Then you will just love, and we can all be part of a larger community. Can I ask you, have you heard of FOR? Okay. Yeah, a lot of people have not.
Yes,
I was
FOR, yes.
I was saying I would behoove you all to raise awareness, but the work that is done still, I mean, people are going still to jail for this, for the cause. It blows my mind. I mean, one person in Texas opened his house to hospice people. I mean, what the work is done is incredible to me. I'm so glad I got on this just now, Kelly and Owen and everybody, and beautiful. So I want to be part of it. I've been an activist my whole life. I'm old now and I'm still doing it. We just lost Richard Dietz, a major. I don't know if you know him. Okay, good. So let me write down my email address. Is that cool? Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Put it on the chat.
How do you say Farishta? So you know it, yeah. If I write down my email address on here, this chat now, you're all welcome to send me your interest, and I will forward that if you're able to do it. It's larger. This, I don't know, Kelly, did you just start this?
Well, this could be a long conversation. We can have a conversation in private. This
Another.
is the 17th episode of the Spiritual Shadowboxing. So no,
Oh,
we
wow.
haven't added it, but this has to be like one of the top conversations. I mean, like Tony, I was getting a little tingling in the top of my head. I felt like we had like stopped time and space. We were in this whole like little cocoon of just possibilities. So no, we do this every other Friday. I think we've been trying to get it, First and I. So we'll let you know. And the Fellowship of Reconciliation is an amazing organization, and we would love to be more involved. And every time I have these conversations with all of you, it just makes me want to do more. But so let's see what we can do, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for the direct and personal invitation. That feels really good.
Mhm.
There's a little one over there. And Tony, I just want to thank you as well from the moment, the instant, the millisecond I met you, I just knew you were all love and light, and obviously the full heart that comes with that. So thank you. I know you guard your time and your energy and your magic as well. So thank you for showing up for this. And I personally felt the presence with the capital P as we sat here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And we're going to end the recording, but you guys hang tight just so we can say goodbye to you as well. Okay.